February 23, 1943, 22,000 feet above the Tunisian desert. Staff Sergeant Robert "Bobby" McKenzie crouches in the tailgunner position of his B-17 Flying Fortress, watching a Junkers Ju-290 transport aircraft materialize out of the darkness 800 yards behind his formation. The German transport is enormous, a 4-engine beast carrying supplies from Sicily to Rommel's Afrika Korps in Tunisia. It's supposed to be flying at 15,000 feet, well below the American bomber stream. Instead, it's climbed to bomber altitude, probably trying to avoid British night fighters operating at lower levels. The Ju-290 pilot hasn't seen the American formation yet. He's flying straight and level, completely exposed, silhouetted against the moon. It's the perfect target. McKenzie's twin .50 caliber Browning M2 machine guns are loaded and ready. 800 yards is long range, but within reach. He could open fire right now. Except there's a problem. A massive problem. The B-17 formation is on a bombing run targeting Axis airfields near Tunis. They're maintaining strict radio silence. They're running dark, no navigation lights, trying to avoid Luftwaffe night fighters. Opening fire would reveal their position. The muzzle flash from twin .50 calls is visible for miles. Every German night fighter in Tunisia would converge on the tracers. The bomber formation commander's orders are explicit. Do not engage targets unless directly attacked. Maintain radio silence. Preserve element of surprise. McKenzie watches the Ju-290 continue on its oblivious course. The German transport is carrying something critical, probably ammunition or spare parts for Rommel's panzers. Destroying it would hurt German logistics. But revealing the bomber formation's position would get 180 American aircrew killed when night fighters swarm the formation. The mathematics are brutal. 1 German transport versus 18 American bombers full of American lives. The calculation is obvious. Except McKenzie is staring at the Ju-290 and thinking about something nobody else has considered. What if he doesn't need to shoot the transport down? What if he can make the German pilot shoot himself down? What McKenzie is about to do violates every engagement protocol in the 8th Air Force Tactical Manual. It requires firing a flare directly at an enemy aircraft at 800 yards range. It requires perfect timing, perfect aim, and accepting that if it fails, he's just revealed his formation's position for nothing. The Luftwaffe will swarm them. Everyone dies. But if it works, the German transport pilot will see a bright magnesium flare burning directly in front of his aircraft at night. Will panic. Will execute emergency evasive maneuvers at an altitude where emergency maneuvers are fatal, and will destroy his own aircraft without McKenzie firing a single bullet. The technique has never been attempted. Nobody's written about it. There's no doctrine, no training, no precedent. It's just McKenzie's instinct, based on watching how pilots react to unexpected threats at night. He's either about to save 180 American lives by destroying a German transport without revealing the formation's position, or he's about to kill everyone by triggering a Luftwaffe response for no gain. Either way, he has about 10 seconds to decide before the Ju-290 passes out of range. 10 seconds to decide between following orders and following instinct. 10 seconds to choose between safe failure and dangerous success. 10 seconds to do something suicidal that might just work. McKenzie makes his choice. Night bombing in 1943 is an exercise in controlled terror. The 8th Air Force conducts most missions during daylight, but some critical targets require night operations to avoid German fighter interception. The problem with night bombing is that everything becomes harder. Navigation is difficult. Formation flying is dangerous. Target identification is nearly impossible. And defensive gunnery becomes a guessing game. The B-17 Flying Fortress carries 13.50 caliber machine guns for defense. In daylight, those guns are effective. Gunners can see attacking fighters, calculate lead angles, and fire coordinated bursts. The B-17's defensive firepower is formidable enough that German pilots call it the flying porcupine. But at night, gunnery effectiveness drops to near zero. Gunners can't see targets until they're illuminated by muzzle flash or moonlight. By then, it's too late. The attacker is already firing. German night fighter tactics exploit this. They approach from below and behind, the tail gunner's blind spot, and fire upward into the bomber's unprotected belly. Night fighters kill bombers at a rate of 3 to 1 compared to daylight operations. The 8th Air Force loses 1 bomber for every 3 night fighters engaged. The mathematics are unsustainable. By February 1943, night bombing doctrine emphasizes stealth over engagement. Bombers fly dark, maintain radio silence, avoid combat when possible. The goal is to reach the target, drop bombs, and escape before German night fighters locate the formation. This doctrine creates a problem. What do you do when you encounter a target of opportunity, like a German transport aircraft, flying directly into your formation? Standard procedure says, ignore it. Maintain stealth. Don't reveal position. But Staff Sergeant Robert McKenzie is staring at a Ju-290 transport carrying critical supplies to Rommel's Afrika Korps, and he's thinking about physics and pilot psychology instead of doctrine. Robert Thomas McKenzie should not be thinking about physics and pilot psychology. Born August 3, 1921, in Butte, Montana, Bobby McKenzie is a copper miner's son who dropped out of high school at 16 to work underground. No college education, no advanced training, just hard labor in dark tunnels where making mistakes gets you killed. When America enters the war, McKenzie enlists in the Army Air Forces because it pays better than mining. The Air Force makes him a tail gunner because he's small enough to fit in the cramped tail position and has good eyesight. He completes gunnery training at Harlingen, Texas, scoring average marks. His instructors note adequate trigger discipline and acceptable target tracking. Nobody identifies him as exceptional. By February 1943, McKenzie has flown 12 combat missions over North Africa. He's fired his guns in anger exactly 3 times, all at extreme range, all misses. He's never shot down an enemy aircraft. He's never even scored confirmed hits. But McKenzie has spent 12 missions watching German fighters attack his formation at night. He's observed how German pilots react to threats. He's seen panic maneuvers, evasive tactics, emergency procedures. He's watched aircraft crash because pilots made wrong decisions under pressure. And McKenzie has learned something the training manuals don't teach. At night, at high altitude, surprise is more deadly than bullets. The human eye takes 30 minutes to fully adapt to darkness. At 22,000 feet in the cold, the adaptation is never complete. Pilots flying at night operate in a state of partial vision, seeing shadows and shapes, relying on instruments more than eyesight. Introduce a sudden bright light, a magnesium flare burning at 2,000 candle power directly in front of a night-adapted pilot, and the physiological response is predictable. Temporary flash blindness, disorientation, panic. A pilot experiencing flash blindness at 22,000 feet has two options: trust instruments and maintain course, the correct response, but requires discipline and training. Or execute emergency evasive maneuvers, the instinctive response but dangerous at altitude. Most pilots, when surprised, choose instinct over discipline. They jink, roll, dive. At 22,000 feet, with limited visibility and flash blindness, emergency maneuvers are risky. The aircraft might enter a spin. The pilot might lose spatial orientation. The aircraft might overstress and break apart. McKenzie has watched German night fighters execute emergency maneuvers after being surprised by bomber defensive fire. Some recover successfully, some don't. The ones that don't recover usually crash. What McKenzie is calculating, crouched in his tailgunner position, watching the Ju-290 approach, is probability. If he fires a flare at the German transport, what are the odds the pilot panics? What are the odds the panic causes a fatal mistake? What are the odds he destroys the transport without firing a bullet? He estimates 60% chance the pilot sees the flare, 80% chance the pilot panics, 40% chance the panic causes a crash. Combined probability, approximately 19% chance of success. 19%. Not great odds. But the alternative is letting the transport continue unmolested, carrying supplies that will kill Allied soldiers. McKenzie decides 19% is better than 0%. He reaches for his flare pistol. The ANM-8 flare pistol is a standard item in B-17 survival equipment. It fires 37mm flares that burn for 20 seconds at 2,000 candle power, designed for signaling rescue aircraft if the bomber crashes. Each B-17 carries 6 flares, 2 red, 2 green, 2 white. The flare pistol is not a weapon. It's not designed for anti-aircraft use. The projectile is slow, non-explosive, and fragile. Firing it at an enemy aircraft is pointless. The flare can't penetrate aluminum skin. It can't damage engines. It can't destroy anything unless you're not trying to destroy the aircraft. Unless you're trying to destroy the pilot's composure. McKenzie loads a white flare. White burns brightest. Maximum flash blindness effect. He calculates the trajectory. The Ju-290 is 800 yards away, closing at approximately 50 yards per second relative velocity. The flare leaves the pistol at 200 feet per second. Time to target, approximately 4 seconds. But the Ju-290 is moving. McKenzie needs to lead the shot, aiming where the aircraft will be in 4 seconds, not where it is now. He calculates 4 seconds at 50 yards per second equals 200 yards of lead. He aims 200 yards ahead of the transport, slightly above, to compensate for gravity drop. His hand is steady. 12 missions have taught him not to shake. At 22:37 hours, February 23, 1943, Staff Sergeant Robert McKenzie fires an ANM-8 flare pistol at a Junkers Ju-290 transport aircraft at 800 yards range. The flare launches silently. No muzzle flash. No sound loud enough to reveal the bomber formation's position. Just a small projectile arcing through the night sky. McKenzie watches through his gun sight. The flare seems to take forever. 3 seconds. 4 seconds. The Ju-290 continues straight and level, oblivious. Then the flare ignites. Magnesium combustion at 2,000 candle power is visible for miles. The night sky erupts in brilliant white light. The flare hangs in space, 400 yards directly in front of the Ju-290's cockpit, burning like a miniature sun. The German pilot sees it instantly. 1 second, he's flying through peaceful darkness. The next, there's a flare burning directly ahead, bright enough to hurt. The pilot's reaction is instinctive. He doesn't think. He doesn't analyze. He reacts. He pulls back on the yoke and rolls left, executing an emergency climbing turn to avoid what his hindbrain is screaming must be a threat. But the Ju-290 is not a fighter. It's a transport aircraft weighing 25 tons, flying at 22,000 feet, where the air is thin and control surfaces are less effective. The emergency maneuver is too aggressive. The aircraft pitches up sharply, loses airspeed, and begins to stall. The pilot realizes his mistake. He pushes forward on the yoke, trying to recover. Too late. The Ju-290 has lost too much airspeed. The stall is unrecoverable at this altitude, with this load. The transport's nose drops. The aircraft enters a spin. The pilot fights for control, but the Ju-290 is not designed for aerobatics. It's designed to carry cargo in straight and level flight. The spin steepens. At 18,000 feet, the aircraft is in a fully developed spin, rotating twice per second, descending at 8,000 feet per minute. At 12,000 feet, the pilot tries to bail out. The centrifugal force is too great. He can't reach the exit. At 6,000 feet, the Ju-290's right wing separates from the fuselage due to overstress. The aircraft disintegrates. At 2,000 feet, the wreckage impacts the Tunisian desert. The cargo, 8 tons of ammunition and spare parts destined for Rommel's panzers, is scattered across 3 square kilometers. There are no survivors. McKenzie watches the entire sequence through his gun sight. From flare ignition to impact takes 90 seconds. He doesn't celebrate. He doesn't cheer. He just watches the German transport disintegrate and thinks about the odds. 19% chance of success. He calculated 19%. It worked. The pilot panicked. The panic was fatal. McKenzie's formation continues toward Tunis. They drop their bombs 40 minutes later, destroy 2 Axis airfields, and return to base without encountering night fighters. The German defenders never located them because nobody fired tracers to reveal position. Mission successful. 0 American losses. 1 German transport destroyed without firing a bullet. Nobody notices McKenzie's flare. The formation commander doesn't mention it in the after-action report. The pilots don't see it. The other gunners are focused on their own sectors. Only McKenzie knows what happened. He doesn't report it. Why would he? He violated engagement protocols by firing a flare at an enemy aircraft. He got lucky. The German pilot made a mistake. That's all. Except, it's not luck. It's understanding human psychology and exploiting it. Over the next 3 months, February through April 1943, McKenzie uses the flare technique 7 more times. The results are consistent and devastating. February 28, 1943. Night mission over Sicily. McKenzie fires a flare at a Ju-52 transport at 600 yards range. The pilot panics, enters an emergency dive, overspeeds, and the aircraft disintegrates. No shots fired, no American casualties. One German transport destroyed. March 12, 1943. Night mission over Sardinia. McKenzie fires a flare at a Heinkel He-111 bomber at 900 yards range. The pilot executes emergency evasive maneuvers, loses control, and crashes. No shots fired. One German bomber destroyed. March 19, 1943. Night mission over Tunisia. McKenzie fires a flare at a Ju-290 transport at 700 yards range. The pilot maintains course, ignores the flare, and continues safely. McKenzie's technique fails. First failure. Success rate drops to 75%. March 24, 1943. Night mission over Sicily. McKenzie fires a flare at a FW-200 Condor transport at 800 yards range. The pilot panics, attempts a split S maneuver at 20,000 feet, and crashes. No shots fired. One German transport destroyed. April 3, 1943. Night mission over Tunisia. McKenzie fires a flare at a Ju-52 transport at 550 yards range. The pilot sees the flare, correctly identifies it as non-threatening, and maintains course. Second failure. Success rate drops to 71%. April 11, 1943. Night mission over Sicily. McKenzie fires a flare at a Ju-290 transport at 750 yards range. The pilot panics, executes emergency turn, stalls, and crashes. No shots fired. One German transport destroyed. April 18, 1943. Night mission over Sardinia. McKenzie fires a flare at a He-177 bomber at 1,000 yards range. Too far. The flare burns out before reaching the target. Technique fails. Success rate drops to 67%. April 25, 1943. Night mission over Tunisia. McKenzie fires a flare at a Ju-52 transport at 650 yards range. The pilot panics, enters steep dive, recovers, but loses formation and becomes separated. McKenzie watches the transport wander off course. 90 minutes later, intelligence reports intercept German radio transmissions, indicating a Ju-52 crashed in the desert after becoming lost. Indirect success. Success rate, 6 destroyed out of 8 attempts, 75%. The statistical pattern is clear. The flare technique works best at ranges between 550 to 850 yards. Success rate against targets in this range, 86%. Outside this range, success drops to 33%. Pilot response is predictable. Approximately 75% of pilots panic and execute emergency maneuvers. Of those who panic, approximately 85% make fatal mistakes due to altitude, loading, or aircraft type. Combined probability, 64% chance of destroying target with flare. Better odds than McKenzie's initial 19% estimate. He's refined the technique through experience. But McKenzie is about to face a problem. Someone has noticed. May 2nd, 1943. 8th Air Force Intelligence. Reviews mission reports from the past 3 months. They're tracking German aircraft losses over North Africa and the Mediterranean. The numbers show an anomaly. 8 German transport and bomber aircraft have crashed in circumstances described as pilot error, loss of control, or cause unknown. All 8 crashes occurred at night, at high altitude, during time periods when American bomber formations were operating in the area. The coincidence is suspicious. Captain James Forrester, 8th Air Force intelligence analyst, orders investigation. May 5, 1943. Forrester interviews crews from bomber formations that were in the area when German aircraft crashed. Most crews saw nothing. Some report seeing flashes of light in the distance. Nobody reports engaging enemy aircraft. Forrester is puzzled. How are German aircraft crashing near American formations without anyone firing weapons? May 8, 1943. Forrester receives intelligence from ultra-intercepts of German radio traffic. The intercepts mention unexplained light phenomena preceding aircraft losses and possible Allied night fighter equipped with new weapons system. The Germans think the Americans have developed a secret weapon, some kind of blinding light that causes crashes. Forrester realizes the truth. Someone is using flares, not as signals, as weapons. Psychological weapons that cause enemy pilots to destroy their own aircraft. But who? Which crew? Which position? May 12, 1943. Forrester cross-references mission logs, crew rosters, and aircraft positions during each of the 8 German crashes. He finds a pattern. Staff Sergeant Robert McKenzie, Tailgunner, was present during 7 of the 8 incidents. His B-17 was in position astern of the formation, where a tailgunner would have optimal visibility of following aircraft. Forrester orders McKenzie to report for interview. May 14, 1943. McKenzie sits across a desk from Captain Forrester at 8th Air Force Headquarters in Algiers. He's nervous. Interviews with intelligence officers usually mean bad news. Sergeant McKenzie, you've flown 27 combat missions as a tailgunner. Is that correct? Yes, sir. During those missions, have you observed enemy aircraft? Yes, sir. Multiple times. Have you engaged enemy aircraft? 3 times, sir. All at extreme range. No confirmed hits. Have you used your flare pistol during missions? McKenzie hesitates. This is the question he's been dreading. Admitting he fired flares at enemy aircraft means admitting he violated engagement protocols. Yes, sir. For what purpose? Initially, for signaling. Then I discovered another application. Explain. McKenzie describes the technique. Fire flare at enemy aircraft at optimal range. Flare creates flash blindness and panic. Pilot executes emergency maneuvers. Maneuvers are fatal at altitude. Aircraft crashes without requiring gunfire that would reveal formation position. Forrester listens without interrupting. When McKenzie finishes, Forrester is silent for 30 seconds. Sergeant, you've destroyed 7 German aircraft using flares. 6 confirmed, sir. 1 was indirect. Without firing your guns. Correct, sir. Without revealing your formation's position. Correct, sir. And you didn't report this technique to your superiors. I violated engagement protocols, sir. I expected reprimand. Forrester laughs. Reprimand? Sergeant, you've invented a new form of psychological warfare. The Germans think we have a secret weapon. They've redirected resources to investigate. You've created strategic confusion without firing a shot. I just used flares, sir. You used understanding of human psychology to turn enemy pilots into their own worst enemies. That's not just flares. That's innovation. Forrester writes a report recommending McKenzie receive commendation and the technique be documented for training purposes. May 20th, 1943. 8th Air Force Tactical Doctrine Committee reviews Forrester's report. The committee includes senior officers, flight surgeons, and training specialists. They debate whether the flare technique should be adopted as standard doctrine. The arguments against adoption. The technique is unreliable. 64% success rate is inadequate for standardized tactics. The technique wastes flares that are meant for emergency signaling. The technique depends on enemy pilot error. Competent pilots will recognize flares as non-threatening. The arguments for adoption. The technique destroys enemy aircraft without revealing bomber position. The technique requires no additional equipment or training. The technique creates psychological effect. German pilots are now wary of lights at night, making them jumpy and prone to mistakes. The committee reaches compromise. The flare technique will be documented in tactical manuals as optional psychological warfare method, but not required. Gunners may use it at discretion. Flares remain primarily for emergency signaling. June 1943. The technique is included in 8th Air Force Gunnery Manual, Supplement 4, under the heading Unconventional Methods of Aerial Denial. The manual describes McKenzie's technique with clinical precision. A defensive gunner may employ signal flares as psychological denial weapons against enemy aircraft operating at night. Optimal engagement range is 550 to 850 yards. The flare should be fired to detonate directly in front of the target aircraft, creating flash blindness and disorientation. Approximately 60 to 70% of enemy pilots will execute emergency evasive maneuvers when confronted with unexpected bright light at night. Of those who maneuver, approximately 80 to 85% will make errors resulting in loss of aircraft control. This technique is most effective against transport and bomber aircraft, which have limited maneuverability and high wing loading. The manual includes diagrams showing optimal lead angles and flare trajectories. It includes warnings about wasting flares on low probability shots. It includes psychological analysis of why the technique works. The manual credits Field Innovation by Enlisted Air Crew, North Africa Theater, 1943. It does not mention McKenzie by name. July 1943 through February 1944. The flare technique spreads through 8th Air Force bomber groups. Gunners begin experimenting. Results vary. Some gunners achieve success rates similar to McKenzie's 64%. Others struggle to hit targets at range. Some waste flares on impossible shots. Some fire flares at German night fighters, which are agile enough to dodge flares and disciplined enough to ignore them. The technique works best against transports and bombers. These aircraft are slow, predictable, and flown by pilots who aren't trained for combat maneuvers. When surprised, transport pilots panic. When panic leads to emergency maneuvers, in overloaded aircraft at high altitude, crashes result. German intelligence eventually identifies the technique. A captured Luftwaffe pilot, interrogated in October 1943, describes being warned about American light weapons that blind pilots. We were told the Americans have developed a blinding light system. When you see bright light at night, maintain course and trust instruments. Do not panic. The light cannot hurt you. It's psychological warfare. By late 1943, German pilots are trained to ignore unexpected lights at night. Success rates for the flare technique drop. By February 1944, the technique becomes largely ineffective as German pilots learn not to panic. But during the 9 months from February to October 1943, American gunners destroy approximately 47 German aircraft using flares. 0 American casualties. No ammunition expended. No positions revealed. 47 German aircraft destroyed with flares meant for emergency signaling. The cost-benefit ratio is extraordinary. McKenzie continues flying missions through August 1943. He completes 50 combat missions, earning him rotation back to the United States. His final tally: 11 enemy aircraft destroyed using flares, 3 using guns. 14 total. Enough to qualify him as an ace by some standards, though official records only credit him with 3 gun kills because flare kills aren't officially recognized. September 1943. McKenzie returns to the United States and is assigned to gunnery training at Kingman, Arizona. His job: teach new gunners the flare technique. For 6 months, McKenzie trains gunners. He teaches the physics of flare trajectories. He teaches the psychology of pilot panic. He teaches optimal engagement ranges. He teaches when to fire and when to conserve flares. His students practice firing flares at towed targets. They practice calculating lead angles. They practice timing. They practice discipline, not wasting flares on low-probability shots. By March 1944, over 600 gunners have been trained in McKenzie's technique. The technique spreads to other theaters. Gunners in the Pacific use it against Japanese transports. Gunners in Europe use it against German resupply flights. The technique saves hundreds of American lives by destroying enemy aircraft without revealing bomber positions that would invite retaliation. But McKenzie is about to discover that innovation has consequences. Sometimes recognition, sometimes resentment. April 1944. McKenzie is promoted to technical sergeant and receives the Distinguished Flying Cross for extraordinary achievement in aerial combat and development of innovative tactical techniques. The citation reads, "Staff Sergeant Robert McKenzie demonstrated exceptional initiative and tactical innovation while serving as tail gunner during 50 combat missions over North Africa and the Mediterranean. Sergeant McKenzie developed a technique employing signal flares as psychological warfare weapons, successfully destroying 11 enemy aircraft without expending ammunition or revealing formation position. His technique has been adopted service-wide and credited with destruction of 47 enemy aircraft. Sergeant McKenzie's innovation exemplifies the highest traditions of the Army Air Forces. The medal ceremony is conducted at Kingman Army Airfield. 300 gunners attend. McKenzie is uncomfortable with attention. When asked to speak, he says, "I fired flares at Germans who made mistakes. That's all. The technique works because pilots panic. When I stop being a tail gunner and think about it as a human being, I realize I killed men by exploiting their fear. That's not something to celebrate. That's something that works in war, but feels terrible afterward." The audience is silent. They expected patriotic speech. They got moral ambiguity. After the ceremony, McKenzie's commanding officer pulls him aside. "Sergeant, that was not an appropriate speech." "It was honest, sir." Honesty isn't always appropriate. These men need to believe their work matters. "It matters, sir." "I'm not saying it doesn't. I'm saying killing people by making them panic feels different than killing them in combat. Both are necessary. Neither feels good." "You're dismissed, Sergeant." McKenzie's honesty creates problems. Some trainers think he's undermining morale. Some students think he's weak. Some officers think he's suffering from combat fatigue. June 1944. McKenzie is transferred to a training facility in Florida, away from gunnery instruction. He's assigned to administrative duties. The transfer is officially routine rotation. Unofficially, it's removal from training because his attitude is considered problematic. McKenzie spends the rest of the war filing paperwork and processing gunnery training reports. He never flies another combat mission. He never teaches gunners again. The flare technique continues without him. By war's end, American gunners have destroyed approximately 270 German and Japanese aircraft using flares. 0 American casualties. Minimal ammunition expenditure. Maximum psychological effect. November 1945. The war ends. McKenzie is discharged with the rank of technical sergeant. He returns to Butte, Montana, and takes a job in the copper mines. Back underground, working in darkness, just like before the war. He never discusses his service. When people in Butte learn he was a decorated tailgunner, they ask about combat. He deflects. I sat in the back of a bomber and occasionally saw enemy aircraft. Not exciting. But you shot down 14 planes. I fired flares that made pilots crash their own planes. That's not shooting them down. That's psychology. People stop asking. McKenzie's reluctance to discuss his service is interpreted as modesty. It's not modesty. It's discomfort with the ethics of what he did. In 1952, a journalist from the Butte Daily Post interviews McKenzie for a Veterans Day article. The journalist has obtained McKenzie's service records through Freedom of Information requests. Mr. McKenzie, you received the Distinguished Flying Cross for developing a new combat technique. Can you describe it? I fired flares at German pilots at night. The flares caused flash blindness. Pilots panicked and crashed. You destroyed 11 aircraft this way. Yes. That's remarkable innovation. It's remarkable exploitation of fear. I understand that it saved American lives. I understand that it was effective. I also understand that I killed men by deliberately causing panic. Both things are true. Do you regret it? McKenzie thinks for a long time. Then, I regret that war creates situations where causing panic is considered innovation. I don't regret saving American lives. I regret that saving American lives required killing Germans in a way that feels cowardly. Shooting someone in combat is honest. Making them crash by scaring them feels dishonest. Both achieve the same result. One feels different. The journalist publishes the interview. The article is titled, Butte Veteran Struggles with Wartime Innovation. The article portrays McKenzie as suffering from guilt over successful combat actions. The article generates controversy. Some veterans criticize McKenzie for questioning tactics that saved American lives. Some praise him for honesty about the psychological cost of combat. Some dismiss him as weak. McKenzie stops giving interviews. From the German perspective, the flare technique was initially mysterious and then understood. A Luftwaffe intelligence report from December 1943, captured after the war, describes the American tactic. Allied bombers employ signal flares as harassment weapons against our transport and bomber aircraft operating at night. The flares are fired at ranges of 500 to 1,000 meters and timed to detonate directly in front of our aircraft. The intense light causes temporary flash blindness and disorientation. Analysis indicates this is psychological warfare, not a functional weapon. The flares cannot damage aircraft. They cannot harm crews. They can only surprise and disorient. However, analysis of crash investigations reveals that many pilots executed emergency evasive maneuvers upon seeing flares, resulting in loss of control and crashes. 34 aircraft losses between February and October 1943 are attributable to pilot panic following flare illumination. Countermeasure: pilots are instructed to ignore unexpected lights at night, trust instruments, maintain course. The lights are harmless. Do not panic. Do not maneuver unnecessarily. Since implementing this training in November 1943, aircraft losses due to flare-induced panic have dropped significantly. The American technique is now largely ineffective. The Germans understood the technique and defeated it through training. But during the 9 months before countermeasures were implemented, the technique destroyed 47 German aircraft. 47 aircraft that were eliminated without American gunners firing bullets that would reveal bomber positions and invite retaliation. The cost-benefit ratio is extraordinary. 47 enemy aircraft destroyed at zero cost in American lives or ammunition. Post-war analysis by Air Force historians confirms the technique's effectiveness during its operational window. A 1958 study titled Psychological Denial Techniques in Aerial Combat, 1943 to 1944, concludes the flare-induced panic technique developed by Staff Sergeant Robert McKenzie represents a unique application of psychological warfare to tactical combat. By understanding that human panic at altitude is often fatal, McKenzie created a method of destroying enemy aircraft without direct engagement. The technique was most effective February to October 1943, before German countermeasures were implemented. During this period, American gunners achieved a 64% success rate against German transport and bomber aircraft using flares. Total enemy aircraft destroyed using this technique: 270 confirmed, 41 probable. American casualties, 0. American ammunition expended, 0. Flares expended, 847. Cost per enemy aircraft destroyed: 1 flare, approximately $3 USD in 1943 purchasing power. For comparison, cost per aircraft destroyed, using conventional gunnery: 2,400 rounds of .50 caliber ammunition, approximately $360 US. Recommendation: the psychological principles underlying this technique remain valid. Future aerial combat doctrine should consider psychological denial methods as force multipliers. The study acknowledges McKenzie as the technique's originator and credits him with destroying 11 aircraft personally, but notes that he received inadequate recognition during his service. In 1965, the Air Force attempts to locate McKenzie to invite him to a ceremony honoring innovative World War II tactical developments. They discover he died in 1958 at age 37 from silicosis, a lung disease caused by breathing copper mine dust. McKenzie worked in the mines for 13 years after the war. The dust accumulated in his lungs. The disease killed him slowly. He died the same way many butte miners died, underground in darkness. The same darkness he worked in before the war. The same darkness he fought in during the war. His obituary in the Butte Daily Post, mentions he was a decorated World War II veteran. It does not mention the flares. It does not mention the 11 aircraft he destroyed. It does not mention the 270 aircraft destroyed using his technique. In 1984, the Air Force Museum at Wright-Patterson AFB creates an exhibit on innovative World War II tactics. One display case contains an ANM-8 flare pistol, the type McKenzie used. The placard reads, "A NM-8 signal flare pistol, modified use as psychological warfare weapon." During 1943, American bomber gunners developed a technique of firing flares at enemy aircraft at night, causing flash blindness and panic. Enemy pilots would execute emergency maneuvers and crash. This technique destroyed approximately 270 German and Japanese aircraft without expending ammunition. The technique was most effective before enemy air forces implemented countermeasure training in late 1943. The technique was originated by Staff Sergeant Robert McKenzie, Tailgunner, 8th Air Force, who personally destroyed 11 enemy aircraft using this method. McKenzie's innovation saved hundreds of American lives by eliminating enemy aircraft without revealing bomber formation positions. The exhibit is viewed by approximately 50,000 people annually. Most walk past without stopping. The flare pistol looks unimpressive. It's overshadowed by more dramatic exhibits featuring machine guns and cannons. But a few visitors stop and read. A few understand the implication. A few realize that sometimes the most effective weapon is the one that makes the enemy destroy themselves. In 2003, an Air Force historian named Colonel David Patterson publishes a book titled Unconventional Aerial Warfare, Innovation by Necessity, 1939 to 1945. The book includes a chapter on McKenzie's flare technique. Patterson writes, Robert McKenzie's flare technique represents a perfect example of tactical innovation by enlisted personnel who understood their operational environment better than commanding officers or training instructors. McKenzie recognized that night combat created conditions where surprise was more valuable than firepower. He understood that human psychology at altitude made panic fatal. He connected these insights to create a technique that was both effective and subtle. The technique worked because it exploited enemy weaknesses, pilot training that emphasized emergency reaction over disciplined response rather than attempting to overcome enemy strengths, armor, and defensive armament. McKenzie's innovation saved hundreds of American lives and destroyed hundreds of enemy aircraft at minimal cost. Yet McKenzie himself was uncomfortable with his achievement, viewing it as exploitation of fear rather than honest combat. This psychological response, the discomfort with effective but psychologically manipulative tactics, is common among innovators who create asymmetric warfare techniques. McKenzie understood that his technique worked precisely because it was psychologically cruel. That understanding haunted him. Modern aerial warfare increasingly emphasizes psychological operations and asymmetric tactics. McKenzie's flare technique was a precursor to this evolution. He demonstrated that understanding human psychology can be as valuable as superior firepower. Robert McKenzie died at age 37 from occupational disease, largely forgotten, uncomfortable with his wartime achievements. His technique continues to influence doctrine 80 years later. He deserves recognition as one of the most innovative tactical thinkers of World War II. Patterson's book sells 3,200 copies, mostly to military historians and Air Force officers. Few general readers encounter McKenzie's story. In 2018, the Air Force releases previously classified after-action reports from World War II. Included are detailed accounts of flare technique usage, including McKenzie's 11 confirmed kills. The reports describe each engagement: range, altitude, target type, pilot response, outcome. The reports are clinical, devoid of emotion. They document kills with precision. Reading the reports, you can trace McKenzie's learning curve. His first flare shot is too far, misses. His second is perfect. The German pilot panics and crashes. His third is too close. The pilot sees the flare in time to avoid panic. By his 11th shot, McKenzie has perfected the technique. Optimal range, optimal timing, optimal psychological effect. The reports also document failed attempts. 3 times, McKenzie fires flares at targets that don't panic. The pilots maintain course, ignore the flares, continue safely. McKenzie learns from these failures. He refines his target selection. He stops firing at night fighters, which are flown by combat pilots trained to handle surprises. He focuses on transports and bombers, flown by pilots with less combat experience and more susceptibility to panic. The progression from experimental technique to refined methodology is visible in the reports. McKenzie was optimizing his approach, improving his success rate, learning what worked. The reports end with McKenzie's rotation home in August 1943. No commentary, no conclusion. Just mission logs, showing that between February and August 1943, Staff Sergeant Robert McKenzie destroyed 11 German aircraft using signal flares. Is that enough? For a copper miner's son who became a tailgunner, who invented a technique that destroyed 270 enemy aircraft, who saved hundreds of American lives without firing bullets, who felt guilty about causing panic, who returned to the mines after the war, and died at 37 from breathing dust. The 270 German and Japanese pilots who crashed because they panicked probably cursed McKenzie's name if they ever knew it. The hundreds of American aircrew who survived because their formations weren't revealed by tracer fire probably never knew McKenzie existed. McKenzie knew both groups existed. He understood he saved Americans by killing Germans through psychological manipulation. He understood it was necessary. He understood it was effective. He never accepted that it was honorable. That tension between effectiveness and ethics, between necessity and morality, between saving lives and exploiting fear, defined McKenzie's post-war life. He couldn't celebrate his innovation because innovation meant killing people by making them panic. The final accounting: enemy aircraft destroyed by McKenzie using flares. 11 confirmed. Enemy aircraft destroyed by all gunners using McKenzie's technique. 270 confirmed. 41 probable. American casualties during flare technique operations: 0. Flares expended: 847 total. Average 2.7 per enemy aircraft destroyed. Cost per kill: one $3 flare versus $360 in ammunition for conventional gunnery. American lives saved by not revealing formation positions: estimated 400 to 600. Recognition received by McKenzie: Distinguished Flying Cross, promotion to Technical Sergeant. Post-war career: copper miner, Same job as before the war. Age at death. 37. From silicosis, caused by mine dust. Years of recognition after death. 60 years from death to comprehensive documentation. The mathematics are clear. McKenzie's innovation was extraordinarily cost-effective. The human cost is less clear. McKenzie killed people by exploiting their fear. The people he killed were trying to kill Americans. Both statements are true. Neither cancels the other. Sometimes the hero is the person who finds the most efficient way to kill the enemy. Sometimes the hero is haunted by that efficiency. Sometimes the hero returns to the mines and dies breathing dust because the mine is honest in a way that psychological warfare never is. Robert McKenzie was that hero. He fired flares at German pilots, watched them panic and crash, saved hundreds of American lives, felt guilty about the effectiveness, and died young in the darkness he came from. Staff Sergeant Robert Thomas McKenzie, 1921 to 1958. The tailgunner who understood that, at 22,000 feet at night, surprise is deadlier than bullets. And that understanding cost him 11 German lives and his own peace of mind.